and welcome to Training for Leadville, episode number 2. I want to thank everybody who watched the first episode, who liked it, who found value in it, who shared it with friends and subscribed to it. I also want to thank everyone who gave feedback and some suggestions on how to improve future episodes. Again, I'm not an advanced runner, and I'm even more of a novice when it comes to filmmaking. So I'd like to thank 2 people in particular. One, my friend Jen, who made some great content recommendations, and the other, a friend of mine, Billy, who is a professional filmmaker and had really good recommendations on how to improve audio and video quality. I'm implementing a couple of those right now. Hopefully the audio comes through better, and in the future I will use some of his advice when it comes to video as well. I'd also like to thank my co-host Murphy, who's sitting in the chair next to me. I'm sure he'll make a couple cameos in this video. In any case, last week was a great week training. My week wrapped up on Sunday, and I did do that long run on Saturday. It was 25 miles, it was slushy, cold, wet, but after the first couple of hours, and really the first few miles, your feet are already wet, it's already cold, and you've kind of just gotten used to the grind. And it gets a little bit easier. It's a weird feeling. I've got to say, I felt great that day. I went out with a running group. I probably did about half the miles with them. I did an aid station for myself. I used my car as an aid station at about mile 10. And at that aid station, I used the same things that I'll use in a race. Some of those things include ramen noodles with the soup, so it's good sodium. I use Tailwind for nutrition. I have little fruit cups. I'll have basically the same stuff that I'll take in a race. I'll drink pickle juice, a few other things, and I'll share some real specifics on what I use on race day. I do that about every 10 miles. 1, it's good to refuel, and 2, it's really good for me to just get used to that when it comes time for race, so that my stomach is okay and properly adjusted. I went on to finishing off that 25 miler, and the next day I had a fantastic recovery run where I did 10 miles. It was a pretty cold day, but I was dressed really well for it, and I can share some of the clothes that I wear on some of these longer runs. 10 miles isn't a very long run, but on a chilly day, I think that it was somewhere around 9 degrees or 8 degrees on Sunday. Being dressed right for it really puts your mind in a good place. I think that a couple reasons the recovery run went so well is because my recovery on Saturday went well. Surprise, surprise. I did a couple of things that I should always remember to do, but sometimes I forget. So right after the run, I had Tailwind. They have a recovery drink that I mixed with coconut milk, and it was great. First off, I like the taste of it, but it's also calories that I take in immediately, and it helps on that recovery. The second thing is I ate really well that day. I had a lot of rice, I had some fish, some vegetables, and I think that the constant fueling and constant hydration, I had about 3 or 4 liters of water after my run, I think that helped out a lot. I also relaxed. I did some work, I sat on the couch, I watched a little TV, I even took a nap. And then that evening, I ended up watching the UFC. So if you're not a UFC fan, I can tell you that this was one of the most anticipated events in about a year or two. There's a guy named ConorMcGregor. This was his comeback fight. He hasn't fought in the UFC for a while, and this was his first fight back. He was fighting a guy who goes by the name of Cowboy. And it was a capacity crowd in Las Vegas, and I watched it on pay-per-view. It was about $75 on pay-per-view, and the fight only lasted 40 seconds. So not a really good return on my spend. If you think about that, it's about $2 per second of the fight. But I had 2 really good takeaways from that. One was about the fighting itself, and then the other was about just kind of how I interpreted the event. I have told you that I'm a below average runner, and before that I was a below average MMA trainer and practitioner, but I did that for a lot longer. So forgive me getting into the MMA stuff for a minute. But when I watched that fight, again, only lasted 40 seconds. If I were someone who was new to the sport and wanted to emulate someone like Conor McGregor and train based on what I saw, I would have said, all right, the fight ended with Conor McGregor punching Cowboy on the ground, and that's what they called ground and pound. Just before that, Conor McGregor landed a head kick, a left head kick. And it was it looked like that was what dazed and then knocked down ultimately Cowboy. So if I were to start training in MMA, I would see those 2 things and say, boy, that's really what I should start focusing in and training on, head kicks and ground and pound. But the little things that McGregor did before that is what really set the fight in motion. They were in a clinch, which is when it looks like 2 fighters are hugging. And McGregor had these 4 really quick left shoulder strikes. One of them actually made really good contact, and I think it opened up Cowboy's nose, and it made Cowboy back off. Dropped his hands, McGregor came in, landed the head kick, and then the ground and pound. Now, The big takeaway from this is that it wasn't just the big head kick and the big flowy movements that you see, but it was the small things, how Conor McGregor did in the clinch, how he did with those shoulder strikes, and how he put it all together. McGregor likely focused on all of those small things during training camp and was able to put it together into a really good performance that night. I relate that to running because we think about running 100 miles and that means you have to run a lot. There's no question about it. There's no way around that. But for me, I also, and this is again personally, I have to do certain things. Like I have to do a lot of hip exercises, core, stabilization. I have to do a lot of planks. I have to do a lot of one-legged balance exercises. A couple of years ago, I got plantar fasciitis, and I ended up doing PT for that. I had to do a lot of things that were stabilizing exercises for my feet. I, at one point, had IT band issues, and I had to do a lot of hip and lower ab exercises to get through them. Now I incorporate those every day in my training because I want to avoid those kinds of injuries. So a lot of the little things really add up to make a difference, on top of the obvious things like running a lot and doing a lot of hills. The second thing that I took away from that UFC fight was more of a state of mind. When I watched the fight, like I said, it was only a 40-second fight and it probably wouldn't have been worth the $75 I spent on it. But the undercard was great. The earlier fights, the less well-known fighters, they put on great shows, they were great battles, some of them were incredibly technical and definitely worth watching. It's a lot of these fighters who aren't the big name people right now, but they want to earn a reputation for themselves. So they really leave it all out there. It was a great undercard. It was absolutely worth the $75 I spent on it, and I enjoyed that. And I compare that to running a lot because if the one thing that I'm focused on is getting that buckle, is finishing Leadville and celebrating at the end, I'm gonna miss a lot. Right now, we're about 215 days outside of Leadville. I've got a lot of training and a lot of things that are gonna go into this race. And a lot of those things I'm gonna enjoy. Some of them are tough. Some of the mental training is tough. Getting out on a cold day, it's difficult, but at the same time, when you get out there, you start to meditate. You become kind of at one. You feel good about the training. The events that I'm going to go to, running with my training groups, you meet a lot of great people and get a chance to create good, strong relationships that last lifetimes. I'll end up doing a number of races, including Black Canyon about 3 weeks from now, Marin a couple of weeks after that, and both of those are going to be times where I'm going to get a chance to enjoy the outdoors, enjoy some amazing scenery, and meet some great runners. So all of these things come together as the small pieces that add up to that great event. Obviously, I want to do well in Leadville. Of course, I want to improve my time versus last year, and of course, I want to do something that's hard and really prove to myself that I can. Prove to myself that I still have a little bit of grit left in me. But I also want to make sure that I enjoy a lot of the things that come through the training and that come through getting ready for this race. Again, we use the term a lot, it's not the destination, but it's the journey. In this case, it really has to be about the journey because I don't think you get to the destination unless you have a really good journey. In any case, I want to thank you again for joining. Last week was a great training week. I'm off to a fantastic start this week. I'll go into some detail later in the week, but I am going to be traveling a little bit. I've got a chance to actually run some hills and then capped off by a long run at the end of the week. So I'll share more about that probably this weekend. But before that, if you have any questions for me, if you have any suggestions or comments, please make them. I'm learning a lot about how to create these videos, and I really want this to be a good resource for anyone training for an ultra, training for a 100-mile, or just looking to get up and do some running. So thank you again for all of your advice, for tuning in, for watching, and please share this if anyone is going to benefit from this video. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.